Paul?
Thanks. It's Paul Morland from Peel Hunt. You showed us quite early on in the presentation your experience in the US market with sports contracts, and you haven't been overly successful over the last 3 to 4 years. Why do you think that is, and why is that going to change now?
Paul, I think one factor is that we need to acknowledge here is that in markets such as France, Spain, UK, we are very clear market leaders. Now, to some extent, obviously, when you move to North America, we're a leading player in what is a fragmented market, and of course, at the entry level, a market that still has a dominant leader in Intuit. So, naturally, the take-up of these premium contracts and the developing that service in a market which regards support as a narrower concept, typically as maintenance, is going to be slower. So I think one of the critical reasons why it's been slower has been the market dynamics. And I think as well, to some extent, over the last 2 or 3 years, our priorities have lain elsewhere. We've very much asked Sue Svensson to address and improve profitability in the business, and she's done that. You've seen that we've continued, whilst doing that, to invest in things like business care, but there is a question of relative priorities as well, and the market dynamic.
Okay, Mark.
If I remember back to a presentation in Boston when Paul was slightly less distinguished and David Clayton was sitting the other side of the room, there was a lot of talk about a 10% growth opportunity or a 10% growth rate to be delivered in the US. If we look back over the last 10 years, I think the maximum organic growth rate is about 5%. Can you talk a little bit about the brand issues that you had in the US, the fact that you didn't have this consistent brand, the move from Sage to Best to Sage, and what impact that maybe had on the inability to sort of hit the targets in the US marketplace?
Well, that's a long story about the brand. To try to make it a short answer, we couldn't trade under a unified brand Sage for a long time because of somebody else who had the brand. It took us a long time to negotiate and finally get the ability to buy it back for a reasonable amount of money. Creating a brand in what is the largest market in the world takes time. The way we create brand is not by pouring huge amount of advertising. The way we create brands in our market is through customers. And customers retain their old brand in their mind for between 3 and 7 years, and we've changed brands in many, many countries, so we know that. So it takes 5 to 7 years typically to get the customer mindset to think no longer about their old brand, but to accept that the new brand is Sage. We are getting close to that time period in the US. The other element of creating a strong brand is your market share. And when you have a leading market share in a given country, you have many, many more customers who use and know your brand than others. When you're not the leading player in a market, it takes a lot more effort and time to create that brand. So that is the brand story, and how that impacts our business in multiple ways. The brand is very critical in entry level and in SMBs. And our brand is getting recognized. I don't know if my North American colleagues here have any data, but I know there's been a lot of progress in North America about brand in the past 2 years. I just don't have data with me. Anybody? No. All right.
Okay. We'll take one from over this side. Milan.
If one subscribes to the view that subscription revenues are good and not denting profitability, why link the recurring revenue model with only on-demand or cloud-based delivery? Why not offer customers the ability to buy other products, on-premise products, on a multi-year basis and see what they decide?
This is a good idea that we have implemented in some countries, and which is working quite well. Competitively, in some markets, it will be viewed as an aggressive tactic because it forces customers to get the early contract in a way. And many customers will say, no, I don't want that. So competitively, it's not accepted in certain markets. We've done it. And where we've done it, we've been very happy, and we'd like to do more of it. And we have that in our plans everywhere where we think we can. And clearly, the emergence and the amount of coverage that online and SaaS is getting may help us to move faster there. But historically, it's not necessarily something that is welcomed in the market if you do that. So, not that easy.
I could take one on Mo.
I can understand your thinking on just trying to upsell and cross-sell to try drive growth, but at what point does growing the user base more significantly become more important again? And how high a priority is growth in emerging markets for you vis-a-vis acquisitions?
That's two questions.
Growth of the user base always has been critical to Sage. You've got to feed the hopper, as it were. Typically, Sage has added circa 300,000 new businesses a year. 2010 it was 250,000, a little bit lower in a recessionary environment. That is critical, not because they spend a lot initially, but they're the people that come back in 2, 3, 4 years' time and spend more. And of course, the point that I think has been made today in one or two of the presentations is that with some of the new SaaS products that we're releasing, we are actually identifying a new target market. So indeed, attracting businesses for Sage at perhaps an earlier stage in their evolution than we have done historically. So it remains a critical objective.
Okay, over here.
Yeah, Paul, you pulled up a slide and you were flagging NetSuite's 49% spend of revenues on sales and marketing, and I'm pointing to the fact that they've got brand recognition. You look at Salesforce.com, close to 2 billion run rate now, decent brand in the market, still spending about 50% of sales and marketing. And probably the problem, as they see it, is that, well, not problem, but the reason is that they have ratable sales, but an upfront cost of sale. And it's not something that, as you grow, you can do much about. So why is it, if you are successful in web services, you will be able to not suffer from that impact in your business? What is it that specifically you see that you can do to mitigate that impact?
Well, I think in part there's a mix effect here, if I may. I mean, we're going to see a very gradual rate of adoption of these services. So for a long time, we're still going to see the very strong margins that we enjoy elsewhere in the business would be part of the explanation.
Yeah, and the other one is we use channels extensively. This pure SaaS model does not really lend itself very well to using channels of distribution because there's not much value to add. And so companies like Salesforce have built their model on a sales philosophy. It's very difficult to move away from that. And so they're a bit hostage to that model. Many companies have tried to build distribution channels when they had very, very, very strong direct cultures, and usually they failed. Maybe not this one in particular. And so I think the SaaS, pure SaaS, has that difficulty, which is it's difficult to get channels excited around it. And that's why we are using a different strategy, and we think that is a better strategy because of where we are at Sage. We're not saying it's better in absolute terms, but it's better from where we are, and we think we have great opportunity with our approach.
Sorry, can I just follow up on that? Sorry, if I could follow up on that. Sorry, so just to understand the strategy then for sales web services, are you going to use the channel for that, or are you going to use it directly? If the channel's not particularly excited about the sales of web services, will you look to supplement with direct sales? I mean,
well, remember, part of it will be bundled within our contract offerings, so that's going to make our sales effort much easier in that sense. And second, we have a direct sales capability to our installed base over the telephone, which is very effective, which nobody else has in the channel. So we're going to supplement the channel with this, but keep them interested in it.
Fred, if you've got a question.
Thanks. Fred Grieb from Credit Suisse. This actually is probably more for Paul. Just in terms of the gross margin analysis you did, I'm curious to kind of just dig into that maybe a little bit more and find out, is it really kind of that 3,000 customer range that you end up breaking even on a gross margin? And does this, sort of fully include the, all the costs around a data center and operating it for a SaaS solution?
On the support, you make a good point. In that analysis, I disregarded in the comparison the cost of support. Now, on the one hand, you could say, well, in the Sage 1 example, it's 24/7 support, so it's going to be more expensive than a traditional support provision at Sage. On the other hand, by virtue of the online delivery of the product, there is equally an argument to say that the support will be less intense from the point of view of contact. Now, that is, frankly, sitting here with a product that we released 2 weeks ago, that's still to be proven, Fred. But we took the support, therefore, as a net neutral to that analysis.
Thomas?
Just on the hardware part of it as well? I mean, does this include all the hardware? Sorry, all the hardware and the cost of maintaining data center, having folks do the upgrades?
Well, and one or two colleagues may chime in, but yes, it does. I mean, the much of that is outsourced in the particular case of Sage 1 to Rackspace, but yes, it does. It's outsourced.
Thomas, I think you had a question.
Hold on.
Oh, sorry, Simon's going to.
Well, I was just going to add to that. Of course, scale is key. So on the hosting costs, as you grow the customer base, I mean, the variable cost just gets lower and lower and lower. Does that make sense? So you asked about the hardware and hosting. Those costs are significant, to support one customer, because as you get to 1,000 customers, 10,000 customers, 100,000, then your variable cost diminishes very, very significantly.